Hello, everyone, and welcome to season 2 of the Lit Happens podcast. I'm your host, Belle, and we've got Adrielle, co host, as always, the hostess with the mostesses. How are you, Adrielle?
That's interesting. I'm good, thanks, Mel.
Like it?
I like that. I
Yeah.
like that introduction. No, we're good and good. Excited for our season ahead and the different conversations to be had. It'll be definitely a year fun, full packed and fun filled with lots of different ideas and conversations, which I'm sure we're all going to enjoy. But yeah, look,
Fabulous.
it's a great year. Great to be back for season 2 and ready and pumping.
Wonderful, wonderful. Speaking of the new year, we're all about to embark on the 2026 teaching year. Do you have any New Year's resolutions or things that you're working towards this year?
Mm.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I'm not a big New Year's resolutions person, mostly, but I think we've sort of had this in our conversation before. Just making sure I'm prepared rather than running
Mm.
around last minute on those few days of professional development, working on what do I need to do here, what do I need to do there, doing the
Yeah,
inevitable professional development courses, some of those online learning modules. So just
yeah.
preparation in advance has been one of the things that I've been getting myself sorted with nice and early. Look, these holidays have flown by. It feels like we have just down tools and we're back onto it again, even though this is the bigger break. But yeah, I think a greater preparedness and getting into routines nice and easy and early. How about yourself?
Yeah, I love that. So we're not running around frazzled. I
Mm,
think for me this year, I'm just going to focus on being a little bit more present and in the specific moment. I know my type A brain tends to be constantly in a loop of, and then this, and do this, and I've got to do this. And I'm just trying to be a lot more present in the classroom, for the students that I'm going to be working with. So I think that's going to be a bit more of a focus for me in this year, something I'm going to be a bit more mindful of, I think.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's a good thing. Just making sure
Mhm.
you're taking it day by day and enjoy
Absolutely.
enjoying your time in this wonderful profession of teaching. So no, that sounds good.
Absolutely. Well, given that it is the new year of teaching, listeners, we are going to be doing a few episodes on that. So today we're going to be looking at prepping our classroom for a productive new year. And then we're going to move over towards, some tips and tricks we might have about staff development days or planning your learning sequences. So we're really trying to hopefully help with some handy and helpful advice to help get everyone else organized and in routine, and maybe try and take some of our own medicine and make sure that we are organized and
Yeah.
prepared. So getting into that, then we've got our little quip for today, Adriel. Spending these school holidays decking out your classroom. Is that lit? Does that make you all excited? Or is that like a no dog, definitely not here?
Um, I think context is important here for this sort of
Mm,
little quit. I don't necessarily have
right.
my own classroom, so it's like those shared sort of
Yeah.
environments, which
Great
helps me, I
point.
guess, in regards to this question. I don't need to deck out my classroom because I don't have a classroom. But if I was to have my own sort of full time classroom, I still wouldn't be coming in the holidays to deck it up. Personally speaking, my holiday, especially the big break, is just for me to be on break. Look, if you did want to make your space your own in the few days before when we have professional development, when you've got a bit of time to settle in, definitely, I would say, look at your seating plans, your arrangements, and all those sorts of things, and I would get those things sorted. But um, I know you're definitely the opposite to me because I remember when you first came in and I'm sure you're going to share a little bit now as to your sort of perspective on this. But yeah, look, me, I'm more on the other hand where it's just like just the basics and the simple things, and making sure you have intentional rest during your break. So yeah, I live by that there.
Yeah.
So a quit for me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good. I think there's no right or wrong with this one. I think it's totally on personal preference. I think you raised an excellent point. A lot of schools now are moving towards shared classrooms, so it's not as big of a thing as it used to be. I know when I, started working at the school that we worked at, I had gone from sharing rooms and had finally gotten my own
Mm,
room. And so
mm,
it was really special to me to make it a room that I wanted to be in. Maybe selfishly, I think like I want it to look nice for me. Hopefully, it looks good for the kids too.
yeah,
But for me as a visual person and somebody who feels very much in the environment, I do like it to look a certain way. I like it to be airy. I like it to be bright. So, I mean, definitely the first time I decked out my classroom, I spent a couple of days in the week before. I think as you spend years and years in your classroom, you probably don't
Yeah,
need to come in the entire day, right? You might be doing a
yeah,
little
yeah.
touch up here or there, but yeah, sometimes it's nice to just come in that week before. And usually, actually, I use it as a way to force my brain to be like,
Mm,
see, look, your room is here. You've got to come back
yeah,
next week, get
yeah,
into gear, get all your stuff, your lessons, everything organized. So for me, it's often like a nice physical reminder of, okay, we're going to start the new year, get to
yeah,
work, open your laptop, do what you got to do. So
yeah,
I'd
yeah.
be really interested to hear what people think and
Mm,
maybe how many schools are shifting towards the shared classroom spaces, which
yeah,
are, pros and cons to both variations, I think.
yeah.
But yeah, this is
I
definitely, I
think
think, one of those things very dependent on the person.
yeah, and I think also depending on where you're at in your career, which is what you sort of
So true.
raised there. If you're a younger
So
teacher
true.
or new to the teaching profession, I definitely recommend going in nice and early, getting yourself accustomed with if
So true.
you have the available resources to your new space, your new environment, even your desk, in your staff room, wherever you may be sitting, just so you're not running around all nervous and anxious on that first day when everyone does come in. So,
So true.
it's we're not sort of telling these things to scare people, but it's just a nice sort of way to just settle yourself in into your environment. It could be a new environment that you're in. You may have changed school over this break, or whatever it may have been in those regards. So yeah, look, as you mentioned, it's very context dependent upon
Definitely.
who the teacher is. So yeah,
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think we shall get into our very first question for today, then, in our Prepping Our Classroom app. So, question one is how we can organize our classrooms to support a safe and collaborative learning environment. So, what are your thoughts there, Adriel, in organizing your room so that it's like safe and effective?
yeah. So I think I mentioned this before with our little quick sort of question there. If you were to come into your classroom, for me, if I was to come in nice and early there, and sure, like the seating plan is probably a big part of it. For me, like
Mhm.
my seating arrangement, you may or may not have already received your class lists at this time. I know, again, it's a very school dependent sort of thing. You may receive it on your first day back, which isn't an issue, or you may have already received your class lists at the end of last term. So, look, in order to organize your classroom, one of the important parts is you look at the arrangement of your room, your space. What are you going to be popping up in there? What are some of the things you're teaching in that respective year as well? So I know for me personally, if I have say year nine class, year seven class, and then my senior classes, I might start to look at the folders that I have, and look at the work that I've set out. A lot of that is digitized these days, but look, sometimes you may have like a literacy class, or a class that may be more of a behavior class, and you might need resources all ready to go. So if there is something happening in a classroom, you've got three or four different fallback options, that you can have established already. So I think being prepared and being ready for all sorts of situations, like sit there at the beginning of the year in your respective classroom and think, oh, look, what if this was to happen? What are some circumstances, and how would you deal with it? And I think with you being prepared as a teacher, you will definitely then allow for that collaborative learning to occur, mostly because your environment now becomes safe, because students understand that you know what you are talking about, you know what you are teaching, they know that you are in control of your content and your pedagogy and your learning sort of area there. So they have that
Mhm.
trust develop with you, and I think that's definitely
Mhm.
one of those important parts for developing that learning environment. So yeah, it goes back to what I sort of said in the beginning, even as to some of the things I need to be more intentional on, preparedness and routine. Rather than leaving some things last minute, because we've taught for a little while now, and sometimes we can fall into that laziness or that rut where we're just like, oh, that's all right, I'll get to it, or So
Mhm.
it's good to be
Definitely.
prepared, and I think organizing the classroom in that sort of sense would be good. So having your resources
Yeah.
ready to go, and also like how do you foresee teaching your classroom in terms of seating arrangements? I
Yeah.
know teachers will actually at some schools in particular you can't change the
The
seats because there
desks?
might be a
Right.
specific way of learning. So if that's
Sure.
your instance, or if that's one of your sort of obstacles, you may then think, okay, cool. So we have to keep it like this, but how will I then manage my students if you already have your lists? Or just again, like what sorts of students will you or might you get? So just run yourself through a few of those scenarios, and yeah. But look, it's just about getting ready. I think preparedness is big for a teacher
Mm.
because yeah, it
Yeah.
establishes trust. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I think you make a great point about like placement of things. I always like to think about where my desk is. So because my preference is to use the board a lot, I try and make sure my desk is not really blocking it. And also, I'm not really a sit at the desk person. If I sit down,
mm,
I'll grab a chair and kind of sit closer. But I find where the desk is so that things are not covered, everything is or good eyesight, even the way that I rearrange my desk. Like you make a really great point. Some schools, the desks are a certain way, or if you've got that kind of 21st century style, that's a bit
yeah,
more, leisurely, that would be very different too. I know certainly I've had years where I've looked at my class list and I'm like, oh, we're just doing rows this year. Nice, clean
yeah,
rows. Everybody's facing me. And I know that I've looked at class lists and I've gone, okay, fabulous. We can actually do a horseshoe here. Or,
yeah,
I can do a bit of a variation, group tables potentially. But I
mm,
think, I think what you're pointing at is this idea of knowing yourself, knowing your
yeah,
style, and knowing your students and adapting accordingly. And I
yeah,
think, as well, just like you said, making sure that the objects and items that you're using in your room are accessible, are around you, are not
yeah,
blocking anything, and just so that that flow doesn't disrupt you mid lesson when you're teaching. Because we know how hard it
yeah,
is, right? When we get flustered or we're looking for something and then we've lost their attention, then we've got to get it
mm,
back again. So
yeah,
I think you've given some fabulous,
yeah.
fabulous suggestions for that for sure.
I should add a little bit of a caveat there. Like, what if
Mhm.
you're a new teacher and
Yeah.
you don't know any of the kids? From what I've
Yeah.
sort of just mentioned before, it's something that we're talking about. If you already know the students, you know the environment, you're sort of prepared. But if you're brand new, um, think about what you've learned. You haven't got to that point after your years of study at other university or even at other schools. Think about what works for you. And like I said, be prepared. Be prepared for a
Yeah.
multitude of different scenarios because you you have to adapt on the go. That is the nature of teaching, and like you just mentioned, we can get flustered if one thing gets taken out of place because our perfect plan is now no longer viable anymore. So you have to be malleable. You have to be adaptable.
Yeah.
Look, things will cause you to have stress, but like I said, being prepared allows you to be like, okay, cool, this has happened, and now I'm going to proceed this way or that way, or just give yourself different options, not a
Yeah.
dead end road.
Great,
So
great point.
yeah,
Great
yeah,
point. I love that. You're absolutely right. There is no reason why you can't, after a few weeks, go, this isn't working. We're going to adjust. And kids are very adaptable. And as long as you're leading the way, they'll adapt with you. And that was fabulous,
that's right.
fabulous advice
Yeah,
for new scheme teachers. It's wonderful. All right, let's get into the next question then. What visual aids and or maybe design choices would you be making that might help foster like more of an immersive learning environment, getting the kids engaged?
yeah. This is once again one of those questions where if you have your own classroom, if it's a shared sort
Yes.
of space, you may have spaces where you can speak with other teachers regarding this. But if we go with that first sort of scenario there, if you've got your own classroom, I know having as English teachers, those key verbs, I think the HSE verbs are quite important. So glossaries,
Yes.
the different text types, it may sound very, very simple. But yeah, like phrases as well. I've been learning this recently. As I was saying in my sort of current setup at my school, like I don't have my own classroom. However, I find I print a lot of things out or send a lot of worksheets to kids. But some of these worksheets I may put up, which include different ways of sort of expressing yourself in different types of text types. So, for example, for a um, persuasive essay, you're going to have different types of thesis statements, or what is a thesis statement, and there's some of those the key terms that you associate with those respective text types. You might pop them up. Some teachers do this well. I am just going to be straight up and say I am horrendous when it comes to a lot of those visual aids and design choices when it comes to creating these resources. It's just not me. However, um, I love it when I do go into classrooms where teachers do have some of these wonderfully created posters and elements up there, just so you can point to them. They're your tools when you are teaching, and like we just mentioned before, they give you greater focus and direction as well, and again show that element of preparedness that kids will really engage with, and then develop that foundation of trust with you. So yeah, that's probably one of those things with visual aids, and some of those design choices.
Mhm, mhm. You
I
make
would
an
also
excellent point
establish.
about oh,
Oh,
sorry.
sorry.
Mhm.
So yeah, I would also establish like the rules as well. So some of those respectfulness sort of things. So what are the things or values of your school? I'm keeping those up in your classroom. Those are your behavior expectations. This is my classroom. This is what is expected in here. And again, it's
Yeah.
visual reminders. These are visual reminders. I know certain teachers for year sevens coming up might have like little star charts or boards where if kids get to a certain sort of level in terms of the work that they've completed, you might get like some sort of prize, or the class gets an activity, or a free lesson, or I don't know, like it could be anything. But it's something that kids
Mhm,
look forward to, and those visual aids will
mhm.
definitely help foster that immersive learning.
Yeah, I think I was just thinking what a great point you made about, when you're not in a room that's yours or when you're sharing rooms and you might not
Yeah,
have those visuals. I know some people who will have these visual aids in like a PowerPoint or a
yeah,
slides, and therefore they could always project that if they feel like the class really needs it. You often find you have some classes that need
mm,
it more than others. Um,
yeah,
HSC verbs on the wall, great point. And you mentioned as well, like the class rules or the school rules, or, in
yeah,
some schools, they'll put the school values up in
yeah,
every room, or the PBL values if you're a
yeah,
PBL school. And I think all those visuals are so good because I know sometimes when like your mum's on you and you're like
yeah,
feeling like she's naggy, and like sometimes
yeah,
I don't want to be that person and I can just look at the kid and point, and then it kind of does the job
yeah,
without me having to. It's just good to have that visual reminder. All
yeah.
right, that's some really good ideas there. Well, what about then in terms of routines? What are some routines that you establish in your classroom pretty early on, to get the kids settled and on board with learning?
Yeah, this is again one of the things that you want to align yourself with your school's values. So if
Yes.
your school has a certain way of entering the classroom, by all means, you need to follow that. And really to show solidarity with your staff and your school culture to build it. Because I know, like, I've been part of the camp where, like, but I do things my own way, and it's not me to do this or that or whatever. But I think now, like, just jumping out of my own sort of would say stubbornness sometimes. I think it's important for your whole school to be developing that together, because it shows solidarity and it avoids the potential for students to then say, "Oh well, sir allows me to do this," and then you just cause a mess. So I think routines, make sure they are based on what your school has established. So if your principal or your head teacher or deputies all have an edict for the staff that this is the way we are going to be entering the classroom and these are the key foundational rules that we have, you need to make sure you start with that. That's a very important. And then you start off with that respect sort of thing. Some young teachers, even teachers that have been in the classroom for a while, will go into the classroom thinking that you're going to develop a friendship with the students, because it's going to allow you to then be friendly with the kids. But remember, you're the teacher. There is a power dynamic that needs to be adhered to in the classroom. And I think
Yes.
routine wise, you need to make sure you establish what are the absolutes in your classroom. This is what must be done. So I know, for example, one of the first things that I will always wait for is make sure that everyone walks in. Like at our school, you have to wait two lines outside, and students walk in one line at a time. And the teacher greets every single student at the door, which is fantastic. I think that's a great routine. See how their day is going, good morning or good afternoon, depending on the period. And then they go and stand behind their desks and wait for the teacher to say, "Okay, you can have your seats now." Um, Again, this is just I'm just speaking from my context. This is what's happening in my
Yeah.
current teaching environment. But then once they're all seated, and that's all the school stuff, then I will go through. Well, these are Mr. Manny's expectations in the classroom, and one of the big things for me is if I'm talking, all eyes to the front. We have laptops, so your laptop screen should be down, eyes up the front, looking, focusing, and no one else should be talking when either Mr. Manny's speaking or you have a peer talking
Yeah.
in class discussion. Like everyone needs to be paying attention. And I make sure that that's one of those big things, and I establish that under the guise of respect. Um, we're being respectful, and it's just that's like a non-negotiable for me when I do establish my classroom, and I will drill that in for the first 5 or 6 weeks. Sometimes you might even spend 5-10 minutes not doing any teaching because um, kids just in their own world, or they may have had something going on. But you'll find after half a term or so, they start to understand. Okay, these are the expectations. This is what is needed of me to be a contributing member of this classroom. So yeah,
Yes.
look, no talk when the teacher's talking, eyes at the front, respect values. Like these are things that I will really drill into the routine. And I think also,
Mhm.
one of the biggest things that sometimes teachers will get flustered with is, oh, but look, if it's just constant behavior management in the first term, I'm not going to get any teaching done. Look, you'd rather do behavior management for 5 weeks and then have most of your year where you're doing learning, or you could do something like talk over the kids every time they're entering the classroom, but you spend the whole year doing no learning whatsoever. So put in the hard
Yeah.
work with your routines nice and early, and then come in. And again, this is where your individual routines do come into play. This is where each of us are very different in the way that we approach our classroom. But I will say, well, once again, you are the teacher, they are the students. There is a power dynamic there which needs to be adhered to. They are not your friends. Um, However, in saying that, later on down the track, you can have a very respectful relationship with your students, and there's a very big difference between that and that friendship that I sort of alluded to
Mhm.
earlier on.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's one of those routines that I think definitely would
Yeah, I
establish.
definitely align. Yeah, I definitely align with a lot of what you said, Adriel. A lot of your suggestions are kind of best practice, what we see modeled to us as well from mentor teachers, and they absolutely work. They take time, but
Yeah,
you're so right. Once the students understand your boundaries, they will adhere to them. And then if you have them again in the following years, you find you don't have to work as hard because they kind of remember what you
yeah,
expect, and you're just like fine
yeah,
tuning. I remember getting a tip from somebody like if it was a really difficult class where you didn't necessarily want to be like, well, I'm the teacher and these are my rules, even though we're thinking that anyway, but you wanted to,
yeah,
manage your approach a bit, well, these are the rules of this classroom. And it kind of
yeah,
creates like a separate layer. Like it's not Miss Koloska telling you it's got to be XYZ, is the rules of room 23 or room 50 or,
yeah,
room whatever, this English room,
yeah,
this maths room are XYZ, and it kind of alleviates that feel of
yeah,
hierarchy if you're going to have a class that might be waiting to just test your boundaries. So
yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's good. I know I do the lining outside a lot, like particularly for me as a person who's fairly short and petite in stature.
mm,
It's not
mm,
uncommon to have year 7 kids that are almost as big as I am. So for me, lining up outside and then me standing to the side where they're not obstructing me and getting their attention was very important those early
yeah,
years for me, because it was that
yeah,
moment to be like, okay, I'm starting, you need to listen, even kind of, and then saying what I need to say, and then getting them in the room. So I think there's so many strategies. I love a do
yeah,
now or something on the board as well.
yeah,
I think that
yeah,
helps to the kids know, and you can say to them at the door, morning, as you come in, there's a do now. Morning, as you come in, get started with what's on the board. And then
Yeah.
I like that too, because you can have like a little check-in while they start. If you see if there are some students taking a bit of time or their body language looks a bit off,
Yeah.
it's like the perfect opportunity at the start of the lesson to go do a bit of a check-in as well, because
Yeah.
I think that makes a big difference to, the students' emotions and how they're settling into the lesson. So, I
Mm.
think those were some
Mm.
really, really fabulous practical strategies that many
Yeah.
of us can take on board or tweak, or are maybe already doing. Fabulous. All right, well, let's get into some more specific strategies now. So what are some classroom strategies that might help to support a more independent learning in the classroom? Some things that you might have done or established that you felt were really good for helping students stay on track in their own individual,
Mm.
ways.
Mm. Yeah. Look, there's so many things you can to go out there and go with. I will say that, and there's no singular approach to this. But you you probably start off with this idea of developing a student accountability. So
Hmm.
we sort of mentioned some of these ideas here before, where in a classroom we might say, well, these are my rules, but you might get them to say, well, what are some of your goals for this term? Set weekly goals or a term goal.
Hmm.
um, some schools may consider this to be like a smart goal of some sort, which they work towards. But yeah, look, I think goals are important because it gives students purpose. Like, why are we doing this? What is the reason for us developing? Why do we have to look at nouns or the function of sentences or full stops or well,
Yeah.
not in the English classroom. If you're in a senior classroom now, it's like, well, why are you guys here? What is the purpose for you to be in the stream of standard English or advanced English or studies? It's students need to find their why, and I think some of the strategies that we might consider, supporting that independent learning is establishing purpose first, so they have something to continually go back to. So if they're using workbooks, they can write at the front of their books like what are some of their goals for the year. If you're now moving into more of the 21st century learning where your school's all using laptops, make use of like the Google Suites or Microsoft Suites or any of those sorts of applications there. I know I've done this recently where for my seniors in year 12, I said just use one Google Doc for the whole year now, and you've got those multi-tab functions where you can have all your notes in a centralized location, from your drafts to your class notes to your research
Hmm.
notes, to your readings. Like, you can pop everything into this one document. And I think that definitely does help to support that independent learning there because they've got everything centralized. I know a lot of the times when students go to study, sometimes they'll be like, well, where was that sheet or where was that part in the book where I wrote this
Yeah.
down or X, Y, and Z. And then it's like they spend half an hour thinking, and I mean, we all do this. Where did we do this? Half an hour's gone, and they're like, well, I may as well just study tomorrow now. Like, I think just
Yeah.
being organized again, and getting kids organized, structured, giving them those scaffolded approaches to routine will definitely help facilitate that independent learning. But yeah, making them understand that why I think is that important thing. So again, you might spend the first
Mm.
few weeks of the year really encouraging kids. This is why we do this. What do you think? Like, how does this apply to you? What purposes can it, have in your own life? And I think that's significant for us in developing that independent learning. Yeah,
Yeah, that's fantastic. I like that. I think it's good, that idea of goals, or even just the having the lesson outline, so the kids can see kind of what's going to be expected of them that lesson. I know something that I've seen you do as well, is like when you split the board into half or into thirds, and you might have the various activities, and it's kind of a good visual for the
yeah,
kids to be like, I should be onto here now. So there's, like you said, there's so many strategies, and I'm sure this also depends on KLA and
yeah,
on teacher style. And I think the important thing, like you said, is what kind of feel like works for you, or something you've tried a few times. And then strategies where I think if you have a few that you constantly use, your students get used to them, and then it kind of works itself out.
yeah,
You don't because they're so used to doing it, it's become a repetitive thing. Even like having exit slips or something where a student has to reflect on what they covered or what they got through. But yeah, I think if you pick your select strategies and you use them over and over, it becomes part of the learning and the kids don't
Yeah,
question it and they're kept on track and you get a sense of where they are, and everyone's kind of happy. All right, that was really good.
yeah,
Well, in a similar vein then, what are some strategies that might be good for group learning within the classroom?
yeah, yeah. I think group learning is very important. That collaborative sort of space. So I love those
Hmm.
pair share sort of type activities. I think it's very very important. So again, it all depends on like the different activities that you are doing, what your learning sequence looks like, and some of those supports for group learning. But some things you could consider again is your seating arrangement in your class if you have the potential to do that.
Hmm.
So what
Hmm.
facilitates that? I don't know when we were at my old sort of place of employment there, I had the horseshoe set up in my classroom, and I stuck to that for goodness me, 8 9 years that we were there, and that was just it was fantastic because I could be the center in the center of the classroom,
Yeah.
but also it allowed students to all sort of face each other. Um, and be in that dialogue and that discourse with each other, which I thought was really cool. So look, play around with your seating strategy if you are in a school where you have that available to you. In terms of other aspects, there you might have shared docs. Again, if we go into the digital space, where you might utilize the shared documents, and again, both Microsoft Word and Google Docs do allow for this now. So do a bit of research in that sort of regard where you might have, once a week, this is where everyone has to pop in bits and pieces of what they've learned for the week, maybe a reflection sheet
Yeah.
where you can digitize that and have that as homework at the end of each week for the 10-week term. So there's different ways in which you can strategize for that group learning. And I think having something like that not only keeps the students accountable, but it also allows you to track their progress. It doesn't mean that you have to
Hmm.
collect their books every single week or whatever. It's something that you can just sort of keep an eye on as they do go along,
Yeah.
having those docs going. So yeah, those are a few things. I know when I was in uni, this is a long time ago, one of the teachers there said, you might have like if you've got a certain feedback form where you might get the kids, 5 sheets for the whole year, and then just stick them at different random pages in their workbook. Where
Hmm.
you could do this similarly if you get to a stage where this is a group activity now, or you get to your page and it's like, all right, now we're going to hand this to my teacher to get marked. Like there are different things that lots of different wonderful teachers do out there, and you got to find what works for you. But yeah, look, I think
Yeah.
making use of some of those digital workspaces is definitely something that I would encourage amongst staff as we do
Great,
move
great
forward.
suggestions. Yeah, great suggestions. I know as well, I've sort of underestimated as well how much the physical space can impact collaborative learning or maybe lead to maybe some misbehavior. So I know, like, if I've been in rooms that are very cluttered or even rooms where the placement of things makes it really awkward to move
Mm,
through the classroom, either for myself or students, not only is it a bit of a safety hazard, but also like where I place things. So, like, if they're have I got the bin that's near me, or is the bin in the corner next to their mates where they're going to use that opportunity to go and have a chat? And like, I
yeah,
know someone who's had a room that was a very open room on a ground
mm,
floor where everyone liked to stop by and random kids try and chat through the windows. I know that I had to be mindful of how close my
yeah,
desks were to the windows to try and limit distraction. So there's so many things to factor in. And I think the more that you think about it and are aware of it, the quicker you're going to be able to manage it as
yeah,
well. All right. So then maybe Adriel, and you've already offered some really fabulous ideas here. Do we have any kind of final tips or suggestions or comments about preparing our classroom so that we can have a really productive and effective learning year?
yeah. Yeah, I think just go back and look at like what are your goals for the year as a teacher. Um,
Mm,
so what is it that you have for yourself in your classroom? Are you just sort of just trudging along and taking it week by week, or what are some of the things that you want to achieve at the end of each week? at the end of
Yeah.
each term. And we'll get into these when we start to talk about scope and sequences and planning and all that. But I think being prepared is very, very important. Going in with the right headspace is very, very important. Remember, it's a new year. The kids are coming in new. Like you might have a student already on your list where you've already got this like anxiety about having multiple ones of these kids, and it's like, well,
Mm,
you can be anxious, but that's going to affect the way you go into that classroom. So, really, just clean slate with every single student. Don't go with any sort of preconceptions, ideas, preconceived ideas about how they will behave because they will. They might surprise you. Who knows what they've done over the holidays? And I think for you as a teacher, that can be something that will throw off a lot of people. So yeah, just be prepared to change, be malleable, be ready to take on the new year. Remember, it's a privilege to be in these classrooms. You'll have the privilege of shaping that next generation, and it's exciting times. It's exciting times where every year, like I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Every year does get harder and harder. It feels like that for us in education, but again, why did you become a teacher? What's your why? And I think that's very, very important as we do go into these
mm,
preparation sort of phases for
mm,
the new year ahead. Are you going
mm,
in with a clear mindset with these are my goals, this is what I want to impact the world with in terms of my teaching? Or are we going in with a sense of dread where it's like, oh no, like what happens if this happens? What if X, Y, and Z department policies make me do 17,000 other things? Like they're two different complete mindsets, but I know which one will definitely allow you to move further and maybe less gray hairs. I'm not saying that it doesn't have the potential to give you gray hairs, but you'll have less because you're giving yourself options to move through
mhm.
different obstacles that you've faced. So yeah, look, be prepared, be excited, and you'll have a great year.
Yeah, well, something that I really latched onto from what you just said was having your why being represented within your space, within your classroom. I think that's really key. And when you look cool, calm, and collected and organized, that will reverberate to the students as well. And
Mm,
like you said, we all have a fresh slate that year, ourselves, our students, our rooms. So why not try and get on the front foot as best you can, but also exactly like you said, don't worry about if you have to adjust or pivot, and be prepared to, because we do that a lot in
yeah,
education. No day is the same, and it's okay if you have to switch, but going in with a bit of a plan, I think, will help alleviate some of that pressure, and you'll just look and feel renewed and ready to start, as opposed to feeling like, oh, that's all my old worksheets from last year. When am I going to
yeah,
clear that? Like, I'm a big fan of clearing out the old stuff and just having the things in the new year to move forward
yeah,
to. I think it's really good for our space and energy as well. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, all right, listeners, we hope you've enjoyed our first episode in our New Year's teaching series. First episode of our season 2 being Prepping Our Classroom. I know that Adriel has offered some really, really fabulous ideas and strategies. If you guys have ideas and strategies as you're listening along at home, please share them on our socials. Please engage with us. If you look on our socials, you'll see, we've got our email, we've got a website, we've got social media accounts. We are ready and waiting to hear from you guys.